and welcome to the Essential Property Podcast with your hosts, Paul Samuda and Amanda Woodward. With 45 years of combined experience in the world of property buying, selling, investing and developing, they are here to share with you their knowledge in the Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle-under-Lyme and Crewe property market. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Essential Property Podcast with your host Amanda Woodward. And today we have the wonderful Keith Firmin with us today. Hello, Keith.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So Keith is based in the northwest of England and over the last 10 years has been buying property around the northwest, Cheshire, Lancashire, Merseyside and those kind of areas, both buy-to-lets and HMOs. He also describes himself as an active house flipper, which we'll talk about as we go through the podcast today, renting properties to tenants, both privately and on the social housing side of things, and has a heavy focus on the off-market properties. So welcome to the podcast, Keith.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate that.
Good stuff. So we've brought Keith on today to talk all things direct to vendor marketing, direct to vendor in property. As I've been hearing through the airwaves that he's doing a fantastic job in this really quite interesting area of finding deals. And I know some of our listeners will be active property investors, but quite a lot of them will be international investors or those that are just buying through agents and buying through sourcing agents. And I'm hoping that you'll open their eyes and mind to different ways that they can find deals going forward. Now, those of you that have been following the podcast from the beginning will remember that we had Keith's better half on early on the podcast. So we had the wonderful Keith Firmin back in episode 12 talking about the move from Stevenage to the northwest. So I thought perhaps we could start there, Keith, just in terms of the very early days of property for you, how you got started, to give our listeners a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah, I think you've summed up Kim really well there. She is definitely the better half. And I will always preface any conversation about anything that I've done in property with, all I've ever done is copy what Kim has done. That's a true story. I had no interest in property, none. I was quite happy working. Kim got involved in property and I was able to help out because we lived down south and invested in the north, I was able to obviously come on the visits, do the viewings, work out numbers, put forward offers. So I was doing kind of 50% of it, but I wasn't in it full time. I still had a full-time job. And it was only kind of as stereotypical as you can get, where we were coming back from our honeymoon. I was like, I don't want to go back to work. I desperately don't. And I tried out a few other things, not really made a success of anything else. And she very simply said, just join the business and we can both do it together. And that honestly for me was like the light bulb. Somebody had already done it. The path had been set. I just had to follow it. And so I've just piggybacked off Kim and made a career out of it. The direct to vendor stuff, I will take full credit for. That's not Kim. Kim doesn't want anything to do with that. But I'm quite content doing that. That's kind of my bag.
Fantastic. So direct to vendor, let's get stuck into it. So tell our listeners, what exactly is it and why did you start to look at that? Because presumably you had used estate agents, and I know Kim told me that you used a lot of sourcing agents in the beginning. So just talk a little bit about the journey from maybe traditional buying of property through to this new direct to vendor method.
It's a great question, and hopefully it gives you good insight into how it is accessible for everybody. So we'd bought via agents, we'd bought via sourcing agents. We were up in the northwest, so we could do all of that ourselves as well. But I remember very distinctly in December 2019, we were viewing a couple of houses back to back with the same agent, and we were stretching our numbers as much as possible to try and make it work because we couldn't get stuff to stick. And in both instances, we had over offered and we were still like 20K away from what they wanted. I was like, how is this not working? Like, we've moved our lives up to the northwest to make it work, and we're still so far away. And I'm not going to sit and cry about anything, like everything is within our control. So I was like, there's got to be something else that we can do about this. We can speak to as many sourcing agents as possible, but there's a cap on that. Like, it's based on their own activity. What can we kind of onboard and take control of? And I'd known about direct to vendor, but I'd always steered away from it because I'd always put too much emotion into it, thinking, what would a grandparent think? What would my mum think? What would somebody think if they received a letter from me saying, hi, I want to buy your house, it looks terrible. But we'd got to a point in the business where I thought, we've probably not got many other options here. Like, I'm going to have to just bite the bullet. And so I'd kind of mold it over. And then, as circumstance would have, lockdown happened, where obviously everything was shut. And I could see at that point that was going to be the cue to go and do it, because people within property, it was an essential industry. So you could still go and do stuff. I was in my car all day. I wasn't going to be coming into contact with anybody. So I could literally spend all of lockdown driving streets, finding houses that looked empty, send them a letter, knowing if somebody did live there, because it was locked down, they were going to be pretty keen to read everything that comes through their door because they'd exhausted Netflix. And so lo and behold, direct to vendor for us kind of kicked off. So I'm very, very fortunate. I'm very aware when I talk about lockdown, the kind of negative impacts of it. I'm always conscious of that. But from a business side, it really worked out well for us.
Brilliant. So COVID happens, you realise that a change of tact is needed.
Yeah.
And that was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was because the prices that the agents were trying to sell for versus what you could get them for, there was just too much margin. There's just too much difference.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't mind sharing a few of your little tips and tactics, you drive down a street, you see an empty property. What are we looking for on the front of the property?
Yeah, so for a very kind of crudely done direct-to-vendor campaign, you would literally just be out and about. And we all see it every day. Everybody that listens to this will have seen something on a street where they're like, that house looks like the Addams family house, or there's something off with that house. It doesn't fit with the rest of the street. And then it's just an assessment. It is a judgment, which makes me cringe a little bit that you have to judge somebody's house. But are the window frames wooden? Are they in bad repair? Is the roof, are tiles missing? Is the garden... is kind of nature winning? Is it overgrown? Does it look like it's vacant? Is there rubbish in the front garden, like a sofa and a fridge? It's been there for weeks on end because you keep going past it and no one's changed it. It's those little things that you look for. And then you can either go knock on the neighbours and go and ask, like, what's going on with next door? Because you best believe that everybody in the world that's going to want to have that house resolved, it's the neighbours, because they don't want to live next door. Because it's either physically causing their property a problem with rats or with knotweed or with damp, or it's just unsightly and it then affects the price of their house. So they want it resolved. So they're going to tell you everything. And time again, that's been the case. And if you don't want to go and speak to a neighbour because that seems quite out there, a bit ballsy maybe, just send a letter, pop a letter through the door just saying, look, I'm interested in buying if you're looking at selling. And there isn't really a template for what to say. I just keep it really simple. And I've tried out hundreds of different templates, but the simplest ways work. Your name, your interest in the property, your phone number, and how you can help. And that is it. It's literally 4 lines. Just make it clear and then have a follow-up for that as well. So record that address somewhere, go back and put it on a spreadsheet or a CRM, and then send another letter. And then over time, you'll build up a bit of a campaign, and then you'll realize that you can diversify a little bit. It doesn't just have to be letters. You can actually go and speak to people. You can do land registry searches, which I'm sure we can get onto. You can hire private investigators. All you're trying to do is get hold of the owner and find out, does this owner want to sell or not? And if I can, I'll just give you a very quick story. And this is really current, really relevant from today, in fact. So 2021, I appreciate that's not today. 2021, somebody on a Facebook group had messaged me privately, because I'd been in a Facebook group and asked about a couple of houses. They'd messaged me privately to say, look, this house is empty and has been empty for ages. Don't know what's going on with it. Nature's one for sure. You can see it on a street view. It is nature's one. I wouldn't have found it otherwise had somebody not told me. Tried to get in contact with the owner, no joy. Nobody would ever answer a letter. Went in person, spoke to a neighbour. I think I sent a letter to the neighbour. They called me and said, look, here's the guy's phone number. He's always overseas. He's got no interest in selling. Good luck. I want it gone. Tried contacted him. I think he answered the first phone call ever, and that was it. No other phone conversation after that. 3 years goes by, so 2024. It's still on my list, hasn't been resolved, and I hate having unresolved stuff. So I went in person to the neighbour again. She said the same thing. Look, it's still the same. He's got no interest. I know so many people want to buy it. It's getting worse and worse. I said, all right, cool. Leave it with me. I'll try desperately to get hold. And I tried all these different tactics of leaving different phone messages, different styles of text messages. And in the end, the one that has worked for me is I text him to say, look, if you want a blind offer, I'll give you a blind offer just so you know what's on the table and you know what you can achieve. Lo and behold, that was the trigger point for him. Now, it could have been circumstantial timing, or it could have been that particular, look, here's an offer. He sent me across some pictures. I put forward an offer late yesterday. He's accepted it this morning. Wow. So away we go with that one. But that as an example of persistence, speaking to other people and the different kind of routes you can go, not just a letter, but neighbours and a Facebook group. It all builds a bigger picture.
Brilliant. So something that I've picked up there is when you say Facebook groups, are you talking sort of about the neighbourhood type Facebook groups?
Yeah, and that's dicey, right? Because 90% of people in those groups love a good gossip. gonna hate you for whatever. I remember putting one in a Blackpool group. Like I signed up to all these community groups. I put one in a Blackpool group about a house I believed was empty, and it turned out not to be. Like my intent is never to offend people. It's never to offend people, but I appreciate that's on the radar somewhere. Put this house in. Loads of people then going through my own like Facebook account going, you've only set up your account a little while ago. You don't post any actual pictures. Like this guy's just scum. It's like, oh, come on, guys, just give it a break. But the back story of that is, or the kind of the back end of it is, 90% was front facing and just abusive. But the back end was somebody actually said to me as a neighbour, no, somebody so-and-so does live there. I know they live there. They're not looking at selling, but thank you for your interest. That solved my problem. Like I'm quite happy to take that because I know that I've got a result that I want. So I'm quite happy to take the Facebook group abuse. But to answer the question directly, yes, it's Facebook groups, community groups is the way I'll go about it.
Right. And do you think your history and your previous career has helped you with your with your investigations?
I worked in Little Chef. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I worked in the police. So yes, it definitely did. Yeah, and I'll always admit this. The route that I have gone predominantly with direct to vendor is being out and about and looking for stuff, or while I'm out and about looking for stuff. Not everybody is going to be as tuned in as I am, because in my old job, I had to look for stuff. I had to identify stuff quickly and justify in my mind, why is that the case? And what can I do with that? And have maybe the confidence to go and ask questions, knowing that there could be some kind of confrontational element. That's just one version of doing direct to vendor. Like there's other versions. We've got window cleaners that look for us, bin men that look for us. You don't have to be out looking for stuff yourself. You can get other people to do it. And realistically, if you turn it on its head, you're not looking for houses necessarily. You're looking for situations that you can solve. And it comes down to the vendor. So many of the houses that I found by myself have no interest in selling to me because it's just not the right situation for them. But some of the stuff that I've been referred, so this one in particular that I referred to earlier that we've got secured today, he wants to leave the country. So he's got an urgency to his decision making. We all know that if you sell it on the market today, it's not going to be resolved within 10 weeks, which is his requirement. So actually there's a pain point there for him. And that's what you've got to look for. What is the pain point or the problem that I can solve?
Yeah. And it does actually provide a great feeling, doesn't it, when you are actually able to solve that problem for them, because we're not looking to buy stuff, at silly prices. It just needs to be something that works for them, works for you, and you can move forward quickly. I think it's really interesting that he contacted back on that blind offer comment, because I think he's basically thinking, are you just going to be another messer? Just tell me now where I'm at price wise. And clearly, did you have to do much negotiating, or were you there or thereabouts?
No, and I actually, as soon as he accepted, I was like, I offered too high. It's a classic thing. If your first time offer gets accepted, you've offered too high. And I've come away from it and I worked out the numbers again today and I'm like, no, the offer stacks. Like it works. But because he accepted it first time, I'm kind of second guessing myself, like, I could have got in lower. However, my intention behind it is, because it's not a standard construction building, he said it is. He said it's brick. But I know from a neighbour that it's not. So I now have a reason to renegotiate, which was always kind of going to be my leverage point of, I will offer blind, but I need some leverage somewhere to give me a little bit of kind of buffer almost. And so that will be a future negotiation to try and secure it at maybe 80, 75, something like that. If that can't happen, look, it still works for us. That's not a problem. We've got non-standard construction, but the fact that he has been misleading about it, deliberately or otherwise, now leads me to think, okay, so what else is wrong with the property that I've not currently seen? Because I wouldn't necessarily advise offering blind on anything.
Yeah. And I've been out of the market a little while in terms of the non-standard construction stuff. There is a lot of that in Stoke, but we haven't been looking in those areas for a while. What are the lenders like? Are they very comfortable with it now? Because I remember before we used to struggle.
Yeah, so it has been a struggle. You get less lenders, you might get higher rates. We've got, I think, 2 on our books that are non-standard. One is no wimpy no fines concrete, which I think this one is as well. And the other one is steel frame. We've got lending on them at 75% loan to value. It's just, if one lender says no, you've instantly got a very reduced option to go to. Whereas if it's brick built, every lender in the world will lend to you.
Got it. So you spoke initially about the very sort of manual methods, I guess, in the car, driving the streets, looking in the houses, observing and so on. Do you still do that today? Is that still one of your methods?
So while I'm out and about, I will always look for stuff for sure. I'll always make inquiries where I see something kind of live and happening. So like, as an example, if we drive back from Chester Zoo, I know for sure where there's a couple of houses. And so driving back from Chester Zoo, you best believe that I've stopped before in order to then ask the neighbours what's going on with it. I've started to outsource more and more to other people and other methods. In an ideal world, and maybe I'm just well lazy, I want everything to be desktop based. So everything can just be outsourced to somebody else, or I've got the system set up where I can find things. So at the moment, I'm emailing solicitors, probate solicitors, to ask if there's any kind of relationship that can be built. Because again, I'm looking at the end of it, which is what's the problem that can be solved? And the problem, certainly from some of the properties that we bought off market, are I've inherited this asset. I don't want it. I want an easy exit because it needs a lot of work. Well, hello, I can help with that. And so I'm trying to go that route as well. That's a longer, slower route. And you and I both know property's long and slow anyway, but that's a long, slow route. But I'm happy to have that in the background because there's other stuff going on where other people are looking for me and bringing me things.
Sure. And I think we have a saying in our company, we say, never forget the goose that laid the golden egg. Is that it? I think that's it.
100%, yeah.
And, what works in the beginning always works. And sometimes you do think, there's different ways, but there's nothing better sometimes than just literally, on the beat, to use your phrase, and finding the deals. How much has technology helped you, though? I see some stuff on Instagram where you're very techie with the CRMs and the follow-ups. And are you very technology focused in your business?
Probably not compared to some people, right? Like I feel like I dive into it quite a bit because I'm quite keen to try and get processes in place. But then I speak to people who do coding and they're miles ahead of the game. So I'm using AI for stuff. So I'm not at that level. But yeah, I definitely use CRMs. I use the tools that are available to everybody, right? We're all in touch with them. Like you and I both know social media sites exist, and that's been really helpful for me in terms of tracking people down or finding stuff. Street View, Jesus, Street View is the easiest thing in the world to find empty houses on. Like, it's not difficult and it's there for everybody. That's a version of tech. But CRM, to go back to that, I was originally using an Excel spreadsheet. That didn't cut the mustard for me. I need a CRM, so a customer relationship management tool, basically just a database where you can customize it. And that's been really helpful for scheduling follow-ups to remind me to contact people. So yeah, I would say I'm probably in the bottom 50% of people that use tech successfully in property, but I feel like I use it well enough at the moment.
Yeah, I've been listening to some different podcasts and articles where I think definitely the AI can start to be quite an interesting tool for scheduling the follow-ups and so on. So I think it's watch this space in that area, which does start to make the very traditional estate agent start to feel a little bit archaic, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
You've got all these different ways. Okay, so let's have some fun with this. So you're in somebody's house, sitting down on a sofa, having a conversation, or you're creeping around their back garden.
That's the one.
Just some of the live experiences that you've had, I guess some good and maybe some less so we can get a feel for what you're doing.
I'll start off with a bad one. So I'd been invited to a house. So I'd seen this house in Liverpool, a row of terraced houses, just a house that was empty, known to be empty. A neighbour had told me. They put me in contact with the owner of it who had inherited it. Contacted that person and they said, yeah, come around for a viewing. But I could tell they were quite icy on the phone, which isn't great, but I appreciate I'm a stranger. I'm asking to go and view a house that they don't know me about. So I went round. She was really cold the entire time, like almost confrontational. I went around the whole house because I need to do my job. And at the end of it, she was still like just chipping at me the whole time. I said, what's the deal here? Like, did you not want me here? Like, I can leave and not give an offer. I'm cool with that. But you've invited me here. So what's the problem? Do you not trust me? Do you think that I'm going to try and lowball you, which I eventually did? What's the deal? And she kind of backed down from that because I think it just kind of brought to her attention, like, let's be human about this. I've come here. I've brought none of that aggro with me. I'm coming here to try and find a solution. But I think in her mind, she instantly thought that I was going to be a piss taker and offer something low. As it worked out, and she never gave me a gauge on what she wanted, and the property did need work in my defence, but as it turned out, I did offer a low number, and then she got really angry at me and then didn't speak to me again. So I probably shouldn't have offered full stop, but I figured if you don't offer, you never know, right? And she sold it very shortly after that on the market. Happy days, she got what she wanted, and I just got an earful. So that's a negative version of it. Positive version, house that we bought in St Helens, they'd inherited that. Their mum had lived there her whole life. House was over 100 years old. Really sad situation where, as things were failing in the house, the lady that lived there was just kind of retracting into one room. So electrics would fail in one room. So she'd just moved back basically into the living room and just be living by candlelight. It's mad, shouldn't happen. And I could tell that the people that we were speaking to felt embarrassed about it. Now, I hold no judgment over that. No one knows what else is going on. But because it was myself and Kim, and that's a big tip, is if there is a female involved in your property business, I would 100% send the female with you or by themselves, maybe not from a risk perspective, but definitely go with you because that builds a bond quicker than anything else. Kim being with me and having that relatability got us over the line. So this was an older couple They'd had offers from a builder who could offer more than us because they don't have certain costs associated with the renovation works. The next door neighbour had offered on it, and so they've got the relationship, so they know it inside out. And an agent had valued it at higher than we could offer, and they told us all this. We still put with our offer out there, and they accepted ours at 39,999 when they'd been told by an agent you can get 45. And the reason they accepted ours was because we'd spent time with them. We were just ourselves, like there's no front with us, like what? It's not a game. And we were just in a situation where Kim was heavily pregnant. We'd moved up to the area, and we were just telling them these things, and we were listening to their side of the story as well. And so they sold it to us. And at the end of it, once we'd renovated it, we brought them back, and they said that they loved it. So we were quite happy. It was kind of a nice full circle moment. It's been renting out brilliantly ever since then. And that's kind of the nice positive version of it. But another tip that I'd probably give is, whereas when you're going to a viewing with an agent, the agent is just going to either allow you to walk around or kind of give you questions to think about answering, like what's your buying position, do you know the area well, etc. When you're doing direct to vendor, you best believe you better be listening, because they're the people that you need to understand what's their situation. And I didn't get that in the very beginning because I just treated it very much like a normal viewing. You have to understand where they're coming from. Why have they invited you into their house? What does this house mean to them? I know if somebody's living in a family house and is inviting me round, their level of wanting to keep that house has gone up by kind of tenfold because they've got the emotional ties there. So I have to be really sensitive about that. It's not just a business decision at that point. It's can I find something that's going to work for them, bearing in mind the emotional ties that are with this as well? Or are they better placed sticking it on the market? And I'll tell people that all day, every day. If I think they can get more on the market and the uncertainty of that, stick it on the market. And I can recommend people all day, every day for that. But you have to really listen, you have to understand, and you have to ask the right questions.
And I think that's really credible, isn't it? To be able to actually say to somebody, I think going with me is actually not your best option. I think you should look at X, Y, and Z. I think gives an immense amount of credibility to you as a business, because ultimately, really, we do just want them to get the best outcome, and we just hope that we are the best outcome. But I think that's fantastic that you do that. Do you always say that you're a landlord, or do you ever appear that you're buying it yourself?
No, I've never done that. And I haven't ever done it because I've always been fearful that somebody will call me out for lying. And I don't like that. So I've always just been completely upfront, even to my own detriment. I understand that. I've also had kind of, if you're looking at confirmation bias, I spoke to a vendor who owned two houses that were side by side, both absolute dumps, if I'm being honest about it. I spoke to them and I was upfront with them, and they said, I'm glad you said that, because somebody before had offered to me, and they said that they were going to be buying it for them and their wife to live in. And then it transpired that they were a developer, so I didn't sell to them. Yeah. Now, that could just be a story that he's playing out to me to try and intimidate me, whatever. I'm not intimidated by it, not bothered by it. But that really confirmed to me, telling them the truth is the thing that works best. I will always say it's a husband and wife business, because it is. And I know that that works well for us in terms of a sales tactic, I guess, because it is, but it's still the truth. We are a husband and wife team, and we are buying stuff for our own family business. But yeah, I will always just be upfront with it. That might not work for everybody. As I mentioned, the Facebook groups, people will just slaughter you for it, but you can't win everything. You can't. When
I think of direct to vendor, I think of somebody sending out tens of thousands of flyers to every property on a street in a postcode. And I say that because I tried that many, many years ago. Do you do that, or do you just niche and pick these distressed houses that you find?
So if I could just quickly ask you a question, how did that work out for you?
Not very well.
Not very well. So you ordered loads of leaflets and you picked kind of an area, let's say Stoke, and just said...
Basically, we would say sort of ST1 or these cluster of roads, just drop a flyer through every door in these areas. Yeah. And it wasn't a fortune, but, you know, the cost did start to rack up. But interestingly, and we're talking about, 13, 14 years ago, we used to put the adverts in the newspapers. We will buy your house, call Amanda. And people used to call it unbelievably. And there was actually a whole section in the back of the Stoke Sentinel that had like all the property people basically saying, we will buy your house and so on. So I was doing that. And then we were doing flyers. And we have done some direct to vendor stuff, but it wasn't something that we scaled because we just didn't get a great response on that sort of mass drop. I'm guessing you don't do that.
No, so I've only ever done one lot of leaflets, and I didn't like that you couldn't customize it too much, right? Like you talk about ST1, one for every door. I didn't want to do that because I know that in ST1, as an example, you're going to get new builds in there. I don't want a leaflet going. It's a waste of everyone's time and life. It's like a pizza leaflet. I want specific either styles or eras of houses, or specific rows of houses. And that nobody is providing that service that I know of, unless you're getting like a nephew or a niece to do it. No one's doing that. And I've looked and I've tried. It's always just a mass kind of deposit of them. So no, I go very specific. I go specific on houses that I am interested in, and then neighbours either side, and that's it. It takes more work to do that, but it's more specific. And I know that I miss out because when you did your leaflet drops, and so I'll take it back to me just for a second. When I did my leaflet drop, and I've only ever done one, there was a guy that had got in contact with me 6 months after I dropped them. Like I got no response. I got one response saying I'm not interested, and I got no other response from like 5,000 leaflets. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's mental. And I know that you need 7 touch points to really make an impression, but I'm like, with the amount of money that I spent on that 5,000, no. But one guy got in contact and he was going to sell me his house because he was going into mortgage arrears like really badly. And we tried to figure something out, and in the end he was able to remortgage his house. Happy days. But I would never have found him had I not been able to just do a mass leaflet drop. And I know that you miss out by not sending it to everybody, because even if they're not interested, they might know somebody who's interested. And so it is just about visibility. Direct to vendor is about visibility and relationships at its core.
Have you ever put up a big yellow board saying, call Keith, he will buy your house, or I will buy your house?
No, my phone number's not on any toilet walls or in any phone boxes either. I'm not that kind of person. No, I've never done that. Phone number's gone up in properties when we're renovating them to say, look, if you're selling something or if you're looking at buying this, do that. But never the boards. I know people that have had success with it as well. Bandit boards as such, putting them up on, I know the council hate them, but they had success when they were appealing to landlords specifically. Yeah. Like I like that method.
And I don't know whether that's the old school method. We still have some dotted around Stoke, and I see people doing it, which I think is great. You know, I think it's great that you're out there with your balaclava on in the middle of the night putting up the board, which I think is great. But it sounds like you definitely have a more niche strategy, which I think is really interesting. What sort of success do you have in terms of ratios? How many do you letter or speak to before you get some traction?
It's really difficult, right? And I get asked this a lot, and I know it always seems really wishy-washy as to, well, why can't you tell me how many letters you sent out, how many responses you've got, and how many of those are converted to viewings and then offers and then accepted? The reality is it'll be really low, like as a percentage. I know for a fact, having spoken to a number of people that have done it, 1% response rate is decent. So like if you send out 100 letters, you'll get 1% that will contact you and go, all right, I'm interested. And that's it. And from there, you still got to overcome the hurdles. I've got to view it, offer, accept it, whatever. There are ways that you can get that up. Like I know how to get 3 and 5 and 8%. There are different things you can do in order to achieve those success rates, but it's still quite low, right? And I did a talk recently and somebody asked me, why would you do direct to vendor over going to an agent? I'm like, well, let me flip it on its head. What success rate do you have with an agent? How many viewings do you have to do? What discount do you get on that property? And how many do you get accepted? Because my ratios were really bad at that. And I was getting demoralized. So I know where my energy is best spent, and it's doing stuff that I can control. So as an example, some of the houses that we've got agreed were like, so there was a house that we got agreed. So when you spoke to Kim, it would have been around the time that we got a house agreed with. If we'd stuck it on the market, we would have made double the amount of money that we paid for it. You're not getting that on the market. Like that doesn't exist. So that's where I see as being beneficial. But if you're doing direct to vendor and you're putting in kind of the miles yourself, you have to be prepared. It's going to take time, and you cannot get despondent with it because too many people do.
Mm. And the reality is we actually don't need hundreds, do we, of houses? We're actually only looking to buy one, every few months or whatever your sort of pace is. So we don't need the mass responses. Do you also source properties that you find through direct to vendor? Do you always look to buy them?
It's a really good question. So I made a mistake really early on in thinking I have to buy everything. And I reflect back on it now, and I've looked back on my database and I've checked it on Rightmove and Landbridge Street, and I've seen stuff that has sold for prices that I would have paid, but I didn't offer to pay it. And that really hurts me, but it was a really big lesson because I thought mistakenly I had to buy everything myself. And you and I both know that's not the case. You can monetize it any other way you want. Find another buyer that wants it. Go through or pair up with an auction house and get them to take it on, and you take a fee for it. Refer them to an agent. Do something with it so you're monetizing it somehow. Easier said than done. I appreciate that. But you cannot just look to buy everything yourself because you will end up buying nothing. And I'm a real living example of that.
I do see some of your posts on Instagram where you say, I offered this at 58, I wouldn't go to 59, and now it's worth like 145 or something.
Honestly, when I talk back through my data, my CRM, and I've had to delete loads off there because it was like PTSD. I was looking back to them and I would check them. There's one guy whose name is in my head right now. I won't give his surname. His name's Peter. I'd contacted him for like 6 months straight, every month, about a house that he said, I'm not that interested in selling at the moment, but I will give you a call. He never gave me a call and I didn't follow him up in like 2 years. Entirely my mistake. He then sold that house for a price I would have paid. And I look back now and I think, why did I not do that? And it was because I got lazy. Now, there are other things. I had a small human being, a child who needed loads of attention. So I had to kind of take it as a back step. So I understand that. So I'm blaming him and taking it out of his pocket money. But you've got to be consistent with it and you've got to look to monetize it and fight. But it's got to work for the seller as well. It has to work for the seller.
Have you ever got uber creative with deals? Do any kind of lease options or back-to-backs or anything like that? Have vendors gone for that, or has it been more just traditional purchase?
It's a really good question. So I've offered them to people and not secured any that way, but we've gone down the route of that and they've changed their mind. Now, I will always reflect on myself and think, okay, what more could I have done to have secured it, made sure that they were clearer on it? The reality is, it's not, I would say it's easy to go that route when you're off market, because if you try and approach an agent for that, I would say the likelihood is very small that they're going to want to accept it, because either they don't understand it or just think you're creating extra hurdles. That's part of the beauty of direct to vendor. It's a one-to-one conversation where you can control what the outcome is. So whether it is an assisted sale or whether it is going to be a lease option, like you say, or a back-to-back, you're in that wheelhouse. But to go back to the question, no, we've never secured anything that way. Everything has been a straight purchase, but it has definitely been offered, and it's given me the confidence to offer it as well.
Yeah, and just look at some different ways that you can help. I remember starting out speaking with direct to vendors, 10, 12 years ago, and it was generally finance related problems. That was when a lot of people were in negative equity and they'd bought, the house market had dropped. They took out really high mortgages and they were sitting there with a mortgage higher than what the property was worth. Couldn't sell it through an agent really, and they were trying other ways. But that was sort of 2010, 11, 12. What are you finding the conversations are like now in terms of motivation? What is the motivation?
Greed on everybody's part. It's greed. I'm not even going to lie about it. It's greed. Everybody wants the most amount of money. People, I think, and I've reflected on this regularly, I think a lot of people will get in contact with me from one of my letters or a referral or something because they want to see if I can offer them a price that works for them, but that is near to market value, but they would know the benefit of not having to pay agent fees. That's essentially what a lot of vendors are looking for that I've been in contact with. And that's just not realistic. And a lot of vendors are wild with their estimations on what their property is worth, and they will then come back. There's a guy right now, I spoke to him literally just before we came on here, viewed his property in Blackpool. It's a residential house that's been completely gutted. It's a mess. And there's a shop next door, which he owns as well. And I offered him a price and he said, no, because my mortgage is higher than that, very much like what you've just described. And I said, okay, what are your thoughts with it? He said, I'm just going to stick it in auction. And I watched it go around the first cycle of an auction, 30 days worth of auction, which is not really an auction, it's just extended marketing. And it didn't achieve 45,000 when he wanted 80,000. So it's now gone back into auction. I saw today it's got 14 days remaining. There's a bid, whether it's real or not, of 25,000.
Oh,
so yeah, honestly, and I think I was offering like 70,000. And he said no, and I understand why he said no, because he needs to achieve a certain figure, and that's the situation for a lot of people. But I think a lot of people don't have the understanding of your options are limited. If you're taking it into auction, it's not selling. Like, there is a real problem with this then, and so my offer is going to be decreased. But again, sorry to go away from the question then come back. A lot of motivation is still monetary related, not negative equity, but they've maybe got an empty property that's been rented. So the one that I'm buying is an empty rental, or they've inherited something. So it's an empty asset. They want to see, can I monetize it and do something with it? A lot of people won't do something straight away. They'll sit on it, they'll ponder it, and then they'll eventually do something, by which point it's potentially devalued, because people are hoping the market will increase at the same rate that the property, or at double the rate that the property will decrease in value based on wear and tear and just it being vacant and the extra 300% council tax they're getting.
I'd be interested to know if landlords contact you, and do you get a lot of landlords contacting you, or more homeowners?
I would say it's more homeowners than landlords. Landlords isn't a market that I've looked at a lot, but it is on my radar to do, is to focus on landlords, because you and I both know right now in the market, especially with yesterday's renters' rights bill, landlords are getting squeezed again, and it's still very unattractive. And you look in any Facebook group to do with property investors, and investors going, who's actually going to carry on being a landlord? And so there's a market there to sell, and sell quickly. But again, my expectation is that landlords, we're all greedy, we all want the most. And so it's just finding the right kind of conversation to have. But you're right, landlords is definitely an avenue to be going down.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, for people like yourself and us, we're in the market so long now that it doesn't matter what happens, what negative changes take place. We're just too far in, aren't we? We're just like, it is what
We're
it
fully
is.
committed. Yeah, we're
We are
married to
fully
it.
committed, and if Labour end up perhaps 2 terms and we get a bit of a beating, you and we're not looking to be in property for a few years. It's a few decades, really, isn't it? So we'll just ride it out. But I think for the 1 and 2 property owners, if you're a landlord and you've got one, and you're 50, 60 years old, perhaps I'd even say, look, just get out. I mean, you might not be making any money. You're probably paying more tax than you're making profit. So, but I think we're just like, balls deep, I think is the phrase.
We're just blind is what we are now. We're like, oh my God, I've just got to stay in this now. It's like having a bad marriage. I'm married. We're 50 years deep into this. I've got to stay in it until one of us dies. It'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. But just quickly, you've actually touched on something really important there, that the landlords who are older, who have owned their properties for maybe 25 years, there's stuff that you can do with Companies House in order to find those landlords, which I've been doing and had success with, contacting landlords directly, because I'm looking at when did they create a company, knowing that maybe it's 25 years later, so the term of the mortgage is probably coming up now. Plus, on an age basis, you can obviously find out who the directors are. If they're at a certain age, do they want the hassle of being a landlord where a property's coming up to term? No. So can I solve it? Maybe. So there's another batch of letters going out within the next 48 hours for that. But we have had success with that. But it's like you say, it's trying to figure out where is the pain, or who is the group that is pained most at the moment, and it is landlords at the moment. So can we get in touch with them, and how can we get in contact with them, and what can I propose to them to try and make it as easy as possible? Kim, my wife, is amazing at just saying, when it comes to working with builders or anybody, I want to make their life as easy as possible because I know they'll want to work with me again. And when she told me that out loud, she'd been operating this way for ages and I'd never twigged. As soon as she said it out loud, I was like, that makes so much sense. Everybody always complains about the grief they get with stuff. I'm like, no, if you make it as easy as possible, people want to work with you. Like, it's not hard. So tell them what you'll do. Tell them how you can make their life easy. Pay for legal fees. You won't have to pay agent fees, stick it on the market, no searches, whatever. Make their life easy. They want to sell to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think post the budget, I think you might want to get you've probably got some stuff planned already, but post the budget, if or when capital gains tax is probably looking to be increased, landlords are going to be trying to get their sale in before the end of that financial year, or before that change comes in. And if it does jump up from, say, 28 to 40, they're thinking of putting it in line with income tax. So not to get excited about other people's disappointing scenarios, but we just have to look for where the opportunities are.
Yeah, 100%. I think both of those points are really, really important. I'll lead off with the thing that you ended on there, which is we're not trying to capitalize on other people's kind of misery, because we're all in the same boat. We are all in the same, like, I'm trying to sell stuff, so I'm trying to squeeze it through quickly. But you appreciate, can I solve somebody's problem? That's always how I look at it. And maybe that's the narrative I play to make myself sleep well at night. How can I solve somebody's problem? And can we find a way that this can work for each other? So the guy that we've agreed to take with today, he needs to be out of the country in 10 weeks. I'm not going to ask questions about why.
I was about to say, I'm not going to ask why.
No, and that makes his life easy, so then we can get something done. But yeah, he wants to sell, he wants to be rid of it. Cool, can we find something that works for that? Rather than you stick it on the market and be dicked around for 9 months. You don't want that.
Yeah, no, totally. So Keith, you've obviously become incredibly experienced in this niche area and the whole area of property, which I think, is it about 10 years now that you've been investing?
Yeah, just over a decade. That's embarrassing, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how you help other people get started or start this more niche area of finding deals. Tell us a little bit about that.
So on a direct-to-vendor front, if we start there, I'm putting together at the moment some direct-to-vendor kind of knowledge to then share with people. I can't work out at the moment whether there's going to be online videos, whether there's going to be in-person training. I don't know yet, but I get asked regularly about just a lot of questions about direct-to-vendor. And I figured there's so much information out there, but I feel like people need one particular source. Now, whether I'm the voice that it wants to come from, don't know, but I'm going to be putting together, I think it's going to be videos of literally a step-by-step, here's what you do, here's how you do it, and basically a bit of a flow chart of, when you have this is what you do. When you have this is what you do. And these are the routes you can go in order to find somebody, have that conversation. Here's basically everything that I know. Go away and go and use it to the best of your ability. So I'm putting that together. On a coaching front, I operate on a coaching level. I'm working alongside a guy called Milesh Lakhani. Together, we've got 20 years plus of investing experience in different areas of the country, Wales, the South, the Northwest. And we are working together as part of something called Coaching Collab. So 12 months worth of coaching, structured sessions, making sure people get what they want, which is what they set out at the beginning to do. I'm not interested in doing kind of one-off sessions because I see it time and time again where people say, I need this, cool, I'll coach you on it. And then they just kind of dribble off and don't do anything. I hate seeing people not fulfill their potential. So there's two arms to what I'm offering. Direct to vendor I'm working on, and hopefully October, November time that'll be available. And then it'll be the coaching, which is available now. And you can get in contact with me on, I would say Instagram is the best bet, on Keith Firmin Property, or you can even have my personal mobile number, 07309 686 200, 07309 686 200. Message me.
Amazing. Look, Keith, this has been fantastic. It's been way overdue for us to have a catch up anyway. And I'm so pleased that you were happy to come on and talk with all the listeners. So thank you so much for that. And we will endeavour to keep in touch.
Definitely. Mate, thank you so much for this. It's a really cool podcast. So I appreciate your time on that, and I appreciate you inviting me on.
Brilliant. Cheers, Keith. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if so, please hit subscribe and share with those who you think would enjoy it too. To get in touch with Paul and Amanda directly, please visit their website www.essentialpropertyoptions.co.uk for more information. We look forward to sharing with you on the next episode.